Alright, so hopefully we're recording. And I basically want to go over some of the tricky parts, at least, of maybe the first time of installing something, especially on a Mac, uh, Windows, right? So there's actually two different ways. So if you have an Intel-based computer, so for instance, I can go to my little apple at the top, I can take a look at, my statistics, and if your processor says Intel, you can do boot camp, right? So boot camp's really nice because we can use the full integration and all of these nice specs that we have, not to a limited degree. So we basically just restart our computer, and we would basically just run the boot camp assistant. So I could type in boot camp assistant and basically run this, and it's going to do it all for you, at least based on some of the other steps that I'll go over today. So first things first, if you have an Intel based Mac, you can do it the easiest way, and the best way is of course through boot camp. If you have an M1 or an M2 Mac, however, this is no longer available, right? In fact, unfortunately, you can't use the full capacity of those chips on the Windows because some of the software is not available yet on the Windows side. However, of course, we can use another thing called either VMware, right? So looks just like this, VMware. I think they have like a free 30-day trial. I also know that it's not that expensive, and there is student versions. However, at least for the duration of ours, you could technically use 2 emails, get 60 days out of it, and for the most part, get away free, scot-free. However, you know, if you need to use Revit, I would really recommend the school computers because, of course, they have 2023, and you can maybe work at home if needed. Hopefully, the project actually isn't predominantly heavy. It's more about just teaching the UI of Revit so that you're more familiar. But anyway, there is VMware. There is also Parallels for the M1 and M2, right? So for both of these, it's basically a virtual machine, right? So you're running technically the Windows software on your Mac, right? And of course, the M1 and M2 chips do this pretty well. So yeah, hats off if you have one of those models because it's not too bad. Similar thing, I think they have a 30-day free trial. Um, I think Parallels is a little pricier. They really compete with each other, so I'd imagine they're actually pretty comparable prices. I'm going to be using VMware today, and of course it's a free trial as well. So show you how that works. I know it shows Windows 11, but I do not recommend Windows 11. I really would say Windows 10 would be better in this situation because you want your computer to run faster. And I've heard about some hiccups with Windows 11, and a lot of people do prefer Windows 10. Just throwing it out there. Anyway, to get our free copy, we'll basically just type in Windows 10 disk image in Google. Right, so Windows 10 disk image. As you can see, I typed that into Google. And we're going to get that first thing, ISO file. So that's that disk file that we need to install it. So we'll go ahead and download it, and I've already done the download, so we already have a copy and we're good to go. Obviously, if I wanted Windows 11, I would download the Windows 11. It doesn't charge you on the Windows 11 until after you install it, so I guess keep that in mind. It'll ask you to activate and things like that. So to avoid some of those things, if you already have a Windows computer, hats off to you, right? Of course, you just have to install Revit and pretty much the last step of this video. So we've got our file, we got our Windows 10, we have VMware installed, so we are ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and open up VMware. It usually brings up a window like this, and I'm going to do another install just to kind of show you the process of how to do that. Honestly, has an exact similar process on Parallels, just in case you want to go that route too. So in my case, I'm going to go to File, New, and basically we just need to drag that download that we did. Right, so in my case, it's going to be in my downloads, Windows 10 ISO file. I'm just going to drag and drop it. Things are looking good. Windows 10, 64, great. And of course, you have to make sure that you have enough disk space for this. What is nice about the VMware, if I have an external hard drive, I can install it onto there, and that can be really beneficial in just in case like you're already running low on space, this can definitely be onto a external drive, right? So this is also for the Intel MacBook Pros, but they don't really do so well. So like if you have a MacBook Air, this is going to struggle really hard, and I hate to break it to you, but the MacBook Air probably won't even run Revit anyway. So that might be hard to hear. In that scenario, you might have to just bunk it a little bit at the software lab at the school, and of course use the computer lab for Revit. But it'll go faster anyway. You'll like it. Anyway, if we're on an M1, M2, we're going to go ahead and press OK. I'll set it up as Christopher Rhett. Use easy install. That sounds like promising. We can go ahead and set the Windows 10 here. I just got regular Windows 10 Home, I think. But let's go ahead and try Pro. And there is a student version, so I mean, if you actually did want to use this for a long time, I do know they give heavy discounts for that. But we just need it for 60 days. For instance, see it's going without key, with key. I'm gonna go without key. You can go more seamless, which I honestly find very confusing, like seeing Revit run on my Mac screen. So I like to go more isolated, but I don't know if you can change this later, so I'm gonna just go ahead and go with isolated. And we're good to go. All right, so I'm gonna click finish. It's gonna save that virtual machine. So this is where I would put it on a separate drive if I wanted to, of course, put it on an external hard drive. In my case, I have enough space, so I'm just gonna put it honestly in my downloads folder. I already have plenty of these, so I'll probably delete this one after the video to save on 20 gigabytes of space. So it's gonna go ahead and play. But first we need to actually do the settings. So I do want to make sure that it has the right processors. However, it doesn't let me in while it started. So it looks like by default it's using OK settings. We got 2 cores. We'll talk about this once it's installed. Might fast forward this part depending on just how long this actually takes. In the meantime, let's actually talk about the Revit. Right, so we'll need to sign in. In my case, I forgot my password, so I was going back. We'll need to go to Autodesk. And in my case, I would type in Autodesk Revit 2023 student. All right, that way you can actually sign up for the student access. It actually has, tons of different resources here, but you do need to sign in. So let's go ahead and do that. And I don't think I ever got the password. Either way, let's see if I can get it without the password. Yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, educational role, definitely. Educator, in my case. Go with email, let's try this again. See if I can remember my password on the spot. Oh, maybe not. No. No, I definitely forgot. Might cut this out of the video. We'll see what we have to do there. Obviously got to cut this part out, so. Oh. Come on. I guess I cannot get my password right now. Oh well, let's see how Windows is doing. Doing just fine. Of course, this is what you'll see for that. But unfortunately right now I'm kind of stuck trying to get my password. So we'll let that hang in the balance for a second while we go through the Windows installation of our virtual machine. In my case, I actually do have a copy of Revit that I can install on here, so I can at least show you how to run through the typical business of it. And of course, it'll restart just like a regular computer. So we'll let that hang in the balance and see if I can get this going. Sorry, I might cut this out as well. So many passwords, so little time. Well, that's not that. Well, I couldn't get the password, but it looks like Windows is finally done installing. Took about 20 minutes, and oh, would you look at that? It's still not done. So yeah, this might take several minutes. Um, Obviously just skip this part if this ends up being sort of the recording. Obviously I have my own version of Revit, so I'm still going to go through the installation process and we'll go ahead and complete this tutorial. Obviously it should be enough in terms of resources to get you started, and basically to review some of those programs that we needed, right, was VMware, right, which is of course this program, VMware Fusion, Parallels for Mac, Boot Camp Assistant, right, if you have an Intel version of a Mac. If you have a Windows, of course, you don't have to do any of this, right, and of course just install Revit. But we'll see what this does. I might need to unplug and re-plug my external drive. So yeah, and when you have VMware and you plug in something, you can actually connect. It's like you're running two computers, right? So in my case, I'm going to connect it to my Windows. No, I don't really need the network. It doesn't have the same problems as a regular computer. So for instance, I don't need any drivers. I don't need any extra space or another hard drive or something. Like for instance, right now you can see as I'm making this bigger, it's making things appear, a little bit smaller. And of course, just like any Windows installation, you have to constantly restart. It's not actually serious when it says it's ready to go. Hey, that's me. Anyway, so let's check this out. We should have our external drive connected. Looks like we have our normal drive connected. Let's see, I might have to go to my virtual machine, Bluetooth and USB, and I can connect obviously certain items. And maybe not. It was unsuccessful. Maybe it's still connecting. That's okay. We'll give it a second. Well, I tell you what, this isn't as insightful as I'd hoped it would be. However, I'm obviously available to answer questions, and even though we will get started with Revit on Tuesday, and of course I have it on my Mac. I guess I should have just done this on my Mac, um, or my MacBook. Anyway, maybe stay tuned for part two. I can maybe try and get to it this weekend. Obviously, once we have Windows here, we can go ahead and install Revit. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't look like I'll be able to run you through it. However, I think most of us can understand installation and directions of a regular program, but I wasn't sure if you guys knew how to do a virtual machine. Let's cover at least some of the settings that we can go over. Obviously, I really kind of want to max out these settings, and this is where keeping your laptop cold and plugged in will definitely be very beneficial, because keep in mind, running two OSs is hard on any computer, and you shouldn't do it all the time. I would only do it while you're actually needing Revit, right? So I do want to make that very clear, because this will significantly reduce the duration and life of your chips in your computer. So in our case, I would extend, and of course I can't do anything to it while I'm in it. So I can actually, funny enough, go over here and shut it down, right? So that I can manipulate those settings. It's also the fastest, you'll ever see Windows run, because it's of course. Now, in my case, I do have 24 processors. In your case, what I would say is to use half of what you are capable of. So if you have 6 processors, use 3. If you have 4 processors, use 2, right? It's always safe bet to go with half, right? If you really wanted to stretch it, you can go sort of like 3/4 way, but that's really pushing it, right? 12 in my case would be a safe bet. And of course, I have 128 gigabytes of RAM. So I usually say, again, just halfway, or, whatever seems comparable. Honestly, it doesn't take much RAM to run Revit, but, I'll go with 40 gigabytes, right? Um, Really, the other settings, you might want to check display, and some of this might bug out your computer. In my case, I have 16 gigabytes worth of RAM, but it's only recommending 8, so that's fine. Usually I keep all of these checked. Another thing of sharing, you can also share your folders. It really is a cool program, but, not necessarily needed all the time, which is why Boot Camp is so unique and useful. Anyway, that looks like the settings, and then of course we would run it again to play those settings. course, we'll get a little error message, but that's okay. And it runs anyway. Nice. Pretty quick. And of course, we'd get to Revit. Now, I was never able to, for some reason, I'm having a hard time getting to my email so I can retrieve my password. So obviously I can't show you the Revit installation. And it looks like my external hard drive is messing up too because it is not showing up. So like I said, I'm running into some computer issues today, but hopefully you have found this at least somewhat helpful in terms of installing a VMware machine. So I will leave it at that. Thanks, guys.